Hoxie, Arkansas, a rural farming town 125 miles northeast of Little Rock, the state's capital, seemed an unlikely stage for a classic chapter in the book of conflict and compromise that is America's race relations. Located in Lawrence County and with a population of scarcely 21,000 souls, the Hoxie 21 offered a glimpse of the coming struggle to integrate America's public schools. The seeds of conflict at Hoxie were planted in the late 1940s as several consolidations left the Hoxie School District with a single high school. In 1952, K.E. Vance, a man of physically imposing stature, became superintendent of the school system. Vance pursued a progressive agenda and drew national attention to Hoxie's educational system. Initially, Hoxie citizens appreciated this visibility, as did the school board. Until the integration brouhaha, few if any complaints found themselves in the hands of the school board. Things would change in 1954, as the Supreme Court issued its reversal of the 1896 decision of Plessy v. Ferguson, which had legalized the concept of separate but equal. Brown v. Board of Education declared segregated schools inherently unequal and required integration with all deliberate speed. However, all deliberate speed was purposely vague and gave states the option to integrate at a rate dictated by their own interests. Throughout southern capitals, state education commissioners and legislatures scrambled to find or create loopholes in the rule. Georgia made it a felony for school officials to spend state funds on integrated schools and declared that teachers who taught integrated classes or belonged to the NAACP risked loss of their teaching license. In Arkansas, Governor Orville Faubus, with legislative support, questioned the authority of the court to set aside state laws. In Texas and elsewhere, the Ku Klux Klan again emerged as a public force. Under Vance's leadership, Hoxie moved to comply with the Brown decision and moved to integrate. In 1955, the court declared that entering students in the fall would be attending integrated schools. Although two Arkansas school districts, Charleston and Fayetteville, already began integration 1 year prior, Hoxie began the first town of the Mississippi Delta to embrace the new national law and integrate. Superintendent Vance's position on integration was based on three key beliefs. Integration was right in the sight of God, integration complied with the law of the land, and integration saved money. Life magazine intoned. While other southern communities were busy looking for loopholes in the anti-segregation mandate handed by the Supreme Court a year ago, Hoxie's 5-member school board consciously interviewed parents and came to the conclusion that integration was right in the sight of God. For blacks, integration promised significant improvements in their educational prospects. Hoxie-colored schools were clearly not equal to white schools. Books were few and far between, tattered and torn. In fact, the biggest surprise some integrating students found was a common, small library. The Delta's farm economy inclined its communities to accommodate racial differences. The town's community, regardless of racial boundaries, was homogeneous and tight-knit, both economically and socially. Whites were commonly in the same situation as their fellow black citizens. They were also poor. Hoxie's 1,855 souls had a median annual income of $1,279, two-thirds the national average. Coexistence, compromise, and cooperation in this farming town were necessities. A Hoxie without cooperation was a hungry Hoxie. Adults worked together to achieve the common goal of survival, and children played together. According to Ethel Tompkins, one of the Hoxie 21, on her childhood and playing interracially.
Everybody just got along. In my neighborhood, I played with the kids. I spent as much time at their house as they spent at mine. The only difference was that come Monday morning, they'd head off to their school and I'd head off to my school. And then when school was out, we'd all meet back in the neighborhood and we'd play and have a great old time.
Okay. Initially, integration at Hoxie was peaceful, a model of what could be done. Entering black students were welcome, teachers were supportive. In its July 25, 1955 edition, Life magazine reported that the children were behaving as if they went to school together their entire lives. Though they didn't attend school together all their lives, they did live together. However, this period of cooperation was short-lived. The Life article proved a call to arms for segregationists and white supremacists, fearful of possible social repercussions brought by total equality. As word spread of the successful Hoxie integration, supremacist leaders such as Jim Johnson, an Arkansas state legislator who co-founded the White Citizens Council of Arkansas, voiced concern. These leaders, in an effort to form a segregationist base, enlisted and indoctrinated local Hoxie citizens, including Herbert Brewer, who, caught up in the outsiders' rhetoric, vehemently spat racial slurs. It is noteworthy that a sizable portion of Mr. Brewer's friends and acquaintances were black. He did not argue integration was wrong, but that it was unwanted and only caused problems. As the protests mounted, the school began to feel ill effects. Shortly, Brewer was quoted as saying,
"The bus which passes my house each morning is ordinarily full of children. This morning there were only 6.
In early August, 150 citizens signed a pact to boycott the integrating schools. 2 days later, supremacist leaders claimed 350 signers. However, contrary to segregationist rhetoric, many signers had no school-age children and a very loose connection to the school itself. Only about 1 in 5 actually had school-age children. With the passage of time, a good number of these signers would ask that their name be stricken from the White Citizens Council's resolution. The fear campaign took its toll, as rumors of impending violence swept the small community. School attendance plummeted as time progressed. Teachers began to receive absentee notes from parents as the possibility of physical conflict grew. "Miss Borman," wrote one parent, "we kept Kathleen out because of the dispute in school." Said another, "Miss Borman, please excuse Carolyn for missing school. She was out on account of the color." The protests to the Hoxie integration were not born purely of racial animosity, but of fear for the sanctity of the established culture and mores. Jim Johnson, a state segregationist leader, was quoted as telling the citizens of Hoxie, "If I send my child to an integrated school, I might see the day when I'll be bouncing a half nigger on my knee and have him call me grandpa." Though his remarks were candid, they only reflect white society's wariness of the possibility of interracial relationships. The efforts of the segregationists eventually led the school board to seek legal assistance. In the case Hoxie v. Brewer, the school district pursued a legal injunction to stop activities which hindered the integration of the Hoxie public schools. Simultaneously, the defendants in the case, Herbert Brewer, Amos Guthridge, and White America Incorporated, sought legal action to suspend integration. The court record states, "The defendants, by threats and efforts to intimidate the board of directors, by the circulation of propaganda literature, and by inflammatory speeches, as well as trespassing upon school property under the jurisdiction of the plaintiffs, and by threatening to set up a picket line to obstruct the ingress of children to the school, and by attempting to persuade children's parents to withdraw them from the schools, are endeavoring to hinder, obstruct, and defeat plaintiffs' attempt to comply with federal law with regard to the operation of the school." The court granted the school district's request for an injunction. The case assumed national proportions and became, at least in part, a question of states' rights versus national authority. FBI agents arrived only to prove ineffective or worse. At the highest levels, the administration was conflicted. The FBI agents, staying merely more than a few weeks, were unauthorized to pursue justice and quickly left after this became common knowledge. Local journalism proved to be pernicious. The Jonesboro Evening Sun falsely stated Brewer's efforts, claiming Hoxie schools were released due to White Citizens Council's petition. Rather, they were released for fall harvest. Cooler heads worked for compromise. To hear the cases about Hoxie, a retired St. Louis judge was enlisted. For Judge Leaves, ruling on the case was not a matter of employment nor advancement. He was the truly impartial judge, as reflected in his even-minded judgment and the opinions handed down regarding Hoxie. Herbert Brewer, acting surprisingly rational, though brash, stated that, if by popular majority, the citizenry of Hoxie supported integration,
"I'll get down on my knees in front of the post office at Hoxie and apologize for everything I've said about that nigger-loving school board."
Ultimately, the matter was resolved in favor of the school board. If the school board, rather than stand for righteousness, had compromised with segregationist leaders to delay or cancel integration, the hope of true liberty for all Americans would have been stopped. Hoxie demonstrates amply that compromise can stifle the achievement of justice and morality. If the events at Hoxie had not transpired when and as they did, and the Hoxie segregationists had prevailed, Southern integration might have been delayed for several decades. The delay would create a different America, one in which racism was rampant, animosity fragrant, and hate common. The conflict and compromise of Hoxie influenced Americans from all walks of life. It had a lasting impact on those involved, but also for the race relations of all Americans, as it was the first obstacle in desegregating the American South.